Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into something pretty major, the economic side of the tariffs from the Trump presidency. We've got all the material you sent over here.
Great. Yeah, looking through it, the scope was huge.
Right. So our plan is to kind of unpack what went down, the complexities, and the effects that are maybe still sticking around.
Absolutely. It wasn't just tweaking things. The sources show it was a real fundamental shift in trade policy. To really get it, we need to look past the headlines at the aims, the actual consequences laid out here.
Okay, let's start there then.
Yeah.
Using the info you shared.
Yeah.
What exactly were these tariffs?
Simple version is taxes on imported stuff, right?
That's the core of it, yes. Taxes on imports.
But it wasn't like aimed at just one place.
Well, the main target, the big headline was China. Tariffs hit eventually over like $250 billion of their goods. We're talking electronics, machinery, all sorts.
Wow. Okay. But, and this is important from the materials, allies got hit too. The EU, Canada, Mexico, they faced tariffs as well. Remember the 25% on steel and aluminum? That applied broadly.
Ah, right, the steel and aluminum, I remember that. So it wasn't just China, even if they were the main focus.
Exactly.
And looking at your notes, the reasons, the stated goals, seem like there were a few different angles.
Yeah, the research points to a few key things they said they wanted to achieve. First, push China towards different trade deals, ones the administration felt were, fairer.
Okay, makes sense.
Second, a big push was about bringing manufacturing back home to the U.S. The idea was tariffs would kind of level the playing field for American companies.
Right, protect domestic industry.
And third, it was definitely framed as punishing China for what they called unfair practices, things like intellectual property theft, copying patents, secrets, that sort of thing. Your sources mentioned that clearly.
Okay, so those were the goals. You put these tariffs up. What happened next? The articles you sent suggest the immediate reaction wasn't exactly smooth sailing.
Smooth sailing. No. Chaos is probably a better word, and that matches the analysis here.
Chaos, okay.
I mean, think about it. The cost of bringing goods in suddenly jumps. Then your trading partners, like China, hit back with their own tariffs. It just creates massive uncertainty, right? And drives up costs everywhere because the global economy is so linked.
And that ripple effect we saw pretty quickly here in the U.S., didn't we? It wasn't just numbers on a spreadsheet.
No, not at all. The impact, as your sources detail, was very real for American businesses. Companies with those, complex global supply chains, huge challenges, almost overnight.
Like who? Any examples jump out?
Well, automakers, for instance, suddenly paying way more for imported steel or aluminum. Tech companies saw the cost of parts from China shoot up. And farmers really took a hit.
Ah, yes, the farmers. Your research highlights that.
Yeah, when China basically stopped buying American soybeans, that was billions in losses. It led to those big government aid packages to try and offset it.
And it wasn't just businesses, right? Your research mentioned the cost for, regular people.
Yes, exactly. Some studies, like the one from the Tax Foundation you pulled, estimated it cost the average American household something like $12,277 a year.
Wow. How does that happen?
Well, when imports get more expensive because of tariffs, that extra cost often gets passed along. So you end up paying more for, all sorts of things you buy.
Okay. Now, there was an argument, wasn't there? I think one of your articles mentions this, that, okay, maybe there's some pain now, but it's for a bigger payoff down the road, long-term gain.
That was definitely the narrative put forward. Short-term pain for long-term gain.
So looking back now, based on the analysis in these sources, did that long-term gain actually materialize? How did it play out?
Well, the long-term view, based on this material, is more complicated. Definitely more nuanced than a simple yes or no.
Okay.
On one side, you could point to a few potential positives. There was that Phase 1 trade deal with China in 2020. It had promises from Beijing to buy a lot more U.S. goods.
Right, I remember that deal. Did they follow through?
The analyses later showed the targets were probably, unrealistic. China's buying capacity, the global economy slowing down. Hitting those numbers was always going to be tough. It kind of shows how tariffs are a blunt tool for very specific goals.
Okay. Any other potential upsides mentioned?
There was maybe a small uptick in some U.S. manufacturing sectors. Steel production is often mentioned as an example. Some argue that was a result of the tariffs offering protection.
But
Yeah.
I sense a but coming, reading through your stuff here. Seems like there were significant downsides too, long-term ones.
That's definitely a major theme in your research, yes. A big one was how global supply chains started shifting.
Shifting where?
Well, to avoid the U.S. tariffs, companies started moving production or sourcing parts from other places. Think Vietnam, Mexico.
So instead of manufacturing flooding back to the U.S.
It often just moves somewhere else.
Yeah.
Nearshoring or friendshoring became buzzwords. Tariffs alone didn't seem to outweigh things like labor costs or existing infrastructure elsewhere.
Interesting. What else?
And then there's the U.S.-China relationship itself. The sources really emphasize how the tariffs strained things badly. It fed into what people now call the tech Cold War.
Right, the tech tensions.
Yeah, more restrictions, more competition, less cooperation. Think about the situations with companies like Huawei or TikTok that's part of this bigger picture the tariffs contributed to.
And it wasn't just the U.S.-China dynamic, was it?
Mm.
Your articles mentioned broader effects on, like, the global trade system.
Exactly. By imposing these tariffs unilaterally, the U.S. basically went around the established system, the World Trade Organization, the WTO.
What did that do?
Well, it arguably weakened the WTO. It set a precedent. Other countries might think, well, if the U.S. can do it, maybe we can too. It potentially leads to a world with more protectionism, less predictable trade rules.
Hmm. And economists don't all agree on the overall impact, do they?
No, definitely not. As your sources probably show, there are varying views. Some argue, yes, the tariffs protected key industries here. Others maintain they actually hurt economic growth overall and added to inflation. It's still debated.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, drawing from all the information you compiled. If you had to boil it down, what are the biggest lessons, the key takeaways for you from this deep dive?
Based on your research, I think a few things really stand out. First, tariffs are obviously a double-edged sword, right? They might protect some jobs or industries, but they come with real risks. Higher prices, messing up supply chains, and getting hit back with retaliation. It's a trade-off.
Okay, double-edged sword. What else?
Second, it just hammered home how interconnected everything is globally. One big country makes a policy change, and the ripples go everywhere, sometimes in ways you don't expect.
Yeah, that seems clear.
And finally, look at the fact that the Biden administration kept many of these tariffs in place. Your sources probably touch on this. It suggests there's a kind of bipartisan concern now about the U.S.-China economic relationship, that rivalry. It's likely sticking around and shaping the global economy for a while.
That's a really interesting point about the continuity. So as we wrap up this deep dive based on your materials, it leaves us with a big question, really. Thinking about everything, the goals, the immediate chaos, the longer-term shifts, were these tariffs ultimately a good strategy for the U.S., or were they maybe a damaging mistake for the wider global economy?
It's the core question, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely something complex with effects we're probably still seeing unfold. Lots to keep thinking about there.